Hello and welcome to this episode of Leadership Guest Practices. Today we focus on stories from the youth in Sierra Leone. With the current pace of change and challenges that we're all dealing with in life and work, we can be preoccupied with our immediate situation. Things can slip and we can easily forget that our youth, the future generation of leaders, need support, opportunity and encouragement now. In some parts of the world this of course is more commonplace, but in others it's not even on the horizon. Particularly like Sierra Leone, where it's been difficult to break out of tradition, where equity, diversity and inclusion lenses are still big issues to overcome, and where opportunity can be scarce. The youth have to fight for their education, opportunities and futures, a notable juxtaposition to the West and East. So I'm doubly thrilled to welcome Rasie Bamigbade, leader, coach, author and speaker. Born in Sierra Leone, lived in the Gambia before moving to Vancouver, Canada. As a young child, she experienced the hardships of her native country, including civil war. So naturally, her leadership journey started early through her life, her career and her leadership positions. She's always put the community at the heart of what she does, including the people that work for her, but particularly to the youth of today. Our collective future, as she calls it. Now, as well as being a leadership expert, global executive coach and mentor to many, Rasie mentors the youth movement in Sierra Leone to offer education, support, opportunity and growth for vulnerable young people in the country. As such, she's an active supporter of the youth movement for sustainable development Sierra Leone, and we'll hear more about this now. Hello and welcome to this episode of Leadership Guest Practices, and I'm joined all the way from Vancouver by Rasie Bamigbade. Thank you very much for joining me. Please introduce yourself and particularly tell us a little bit about your first decade in Sierra Leone, which is a fascinating and somewhat harrowing story, I would say, and how that shaped your expertise and passion for helping others, Rasie.
Yeah. Oh my God, Jeremy, thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited. So my name's Rasie and I was born and raised in Sierra Leone, as Jeremy said, for the first decade. And so growing up in Sierra Leone, I was very fortunate to have that foundation from my parents, like education, making sure that you're kind to people, doing the right thing, and not leaving anybody behind. So, and that's something that my parents did in actions. They were always giving to people. They were always taking care of others. Like I had multiple cousins in the same home when I was like growing up. And it was, there was no difference like, oh, I am my parents' kids or they're not. It was like, we're all like family and stuff. So having that foundation and then moving, like going through the Civil War, like I learned how to not take time for granted. I learned how to really appreciate my life that I have and make impact. And this was like at age 11 when I moved to Canada. And I'm like, I have to do all that it takes to get to where I need to be, to do the things that I want to do. So that, and you can say that I grew up very quickly because of those experiences. And now I'm just like, I have to do something to help our youth in Sierra Leone, to help my family in Sierra Leone and really pave the way. And what really like I believe it was in 2016, I made a plan that I was going to move to Sierra Leone 10 years later and do nonprofit work for about a year. And then it occurred to me earlier this year, I was like, why do I have to wait until then? I can actually start, putting some like a little bit of seed here and there until I'm able to do that financially and physically. Yeah.
Wow, I have to say, there's you're the first guest that I say has mentioned the fact that they've been through a civil war. Mm-hmm. Those of us from Generation X, I suppose, almost, we've never experienced in the West and parts of the traditional East, we've not experienced that. And of course, in parts of Africa like this, we hear about it, but it's so removed. And I can understand why you grow up quickly there and have the clarity at 11 years old. Say, you know what, I need to grasp the opportunity I now have in Canada, which I think was great. So now you now reside there, of course, and
yes,
and I could just kind of roll off the achievements. You know, you're a noted order, you're an executive coach. You remain an advocate for your native country, of course, Sierra Leone, as you've just mentioned, particularly its youth. So maybe just let's take a step back, and if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about the conditions there for our sort of Gen Z future, if you like, our future leaders, and the opportunities and challenges they face day to day in Sierra Leone now, and of course in other parts of Africa.
Yeah, there's so specifically for our youth that, you know, my day-to-day interaction with them, either it's like on LinkedIn or, you know, like I've exchanged numbers and we're interacting on WhatsApp, or it's through my mentorship program, the monthly workshops that I do with them, they do share like details. And some of the challenges is like they're not being seen, you know, and they're, you know, they could be knocking on doors, like trying to get some support. It's almost like they're invisible. And then they have leadership that they cannot trust and cannot count on, because things are so difficult in Sierra Leone that everybody's fending for themselves. Like it's almost like, you know, I'm going to help you, but what do I get back in return? Right. And I think that's where it really differentiates like my, the path, like my mentorship program that I take each of my youth through is like, I want them to be empowered. I want them to make decisions. I want them to be in control of who they are and how they show up. And it starts by being seen, like just being, you know, like, yeah, Rasie sees me. She sees what I'm capable of. She sees the potential. And they're all different in their own ways of like what they are able to bring to the table, what they're able to do in paving the way for other Sierra Leoneans, right? And I get super passionate and just like gets really pumped up because there's just so much potential and they're just so intelligent.
Well, you know, it's very funny because I think you and I both have somebody in common, Danielle Essa in Cameroon, who you work with as well. And you know, when I hear her story, your story, more stories from the continent and parts of Asia where I used to live as well, and parts of Latin America, actually, it raises much bigger questions for the world right now. How we share resources, how we help each other, beyond what's going on sort of day to day. Climate change will impact things like water distribution, things like this. So all of these play into the mix. And you have gone down, which I really admire. You've gone down to a really granular level here. And you really commit, as you said, to the youth. Youth of Sierra Leone, you know, and I'd love to just dive into that a little bit further, because we can spend probably too much time out here thinking, wow, we've got these big things, but on the ground, could you explain a little bit about that, the mentoring scheme, the role you play? And I think I'd love to hear also the role that the government plays in this, you know, collectively to the benefit of the youth, or is it people like you that just have to step in and kind of do it differently?
Yeah, it's so I like early this year, I started screening through Instagram and LinkedIn. And this was, you know, having like intentionally connecting with, you know, like if it said like they're from Sierra Leone and, you know, and then looking at their background, like where they were at, either they're in university or they just graduated from college. Those are specifically the youth that I work with. And so I start up a conversation, you know, and sometimes like quite a few of my youth in my mentorship program right now did not hesitate to say, I need help. Like, I love your content. Like, I look up to you. How can you help me? And that's where these conversations started. And then I send them an assessment questions. And basically it's aligned in a way that they can share with me what are they going to do with the information they're going to be receiving. What are they going to do with like that from that conversation? So for me, it's a lot about action. Like, how do you bring on more youth? How do you impact more youth? Like, how do you take care of your environment, the people in the community? So I aligned it in that form that I really understand, okay, these are the challenges and this is where they want to be. And, you know, there's some assessments I didn't get back and that just tells me the readiness, right? Cause I put like all my heart into everything I do. So like, the youth that I work with, they're really got to be in it to make impact. Right. And then I take them through a monthly workshop on different topics. So for instance, like one of the workshops is goals. Another workshop is like, you know, embracing their fears. And then I brought on one of like my coaches, like friend coaches, right? And help them and have ask them for help to be part of this with me. And they love it when guest speakers come on. And then another example is like on advocacy. I have one of my friends out here that's an entrepreneur and does advocate work. So I bring her on to speak to them. And I actually do this all through Telegram because they all don't have access to Zoom. Like, how do I make it accessible for them? And sometimes they have challenges with the network. Like some will come on 30 minutes later, but they still show up, or they don't make it at all because the rain is just really heavy and they actually cannot get through to any network, right? And then they're able to go back to it the next day and review the materials and, you know, make comments on the next workshop. But basically it's like what role the government plays. It's to be honest, like it's very unclear of what the priorities are. Like, is it like, you know, empowering our youth? And a lot of the messages I get from them, they're kind of like from the interactions, the sense that I'm getting is that they're not supported. And all these youth are actually raising funds to provide food for people in the villages, to provide water, to provide, you know, pay for education for the kids. And I don't know, like if I was the leadership at the top and I see that happening, I'm going to do whatever it takes to like protect that and support that. But again, that top leadership is not supported. So they actually cannot translate that. Right. So it's, and that's where that self-leadership comes into play, like really, and I help these youth understand who they are as a leader right now. And I think when you know a lot about yourself and you're aware of that, it's a lot easier for you to give back because you're giving from a place of fullness.
Oh, I love that. A place of fullness. And I imagine, though, just going back to a point right at the end there, is that as you bring those leadership qualities out of those young people who are ready, as you said, and, you know, and on that journey, it must raise questions in their mind when they then look up to their government and say, well, why don't they care? You know, and you know, or some of them, you know, I'm sure some do, but it's like it's a real juxtaposition, isn't it, between the people that they're seeing like you who are stepping in at community level and the questions then raised at government in terms of well why aren't you to the extent that we need you to? What's going on there?
There's a big gap.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Well, it's something that we won't solve, of course, within this. But you know, the more that you do things like that, and your colleagues and people, like-minded people, I think the better. You know, because as you said, using Telegram when you're having to use the network, but then getting past the fact that it might not always be on or fast or whatever. It really does put into perspective some of the more entitled parts of the world in the West and the East where, you know, it's like, well, you know, what gigabytes is going to be my next iPhone? You know, it's just really, it's crazy, isn't it? But going back to the beginning, I love that process of that readiness element, as you said, you know, doing the assessment and then moving from words to action. So making sure that people kind of go through there. Maybe it's an unfair question, but without naming names, do you have an example of somebody that you've worked with, a young person you've worked with who you've been really impressed with, who's really grasped hold of this and done something? Go on, give us one.
Absolutely. It's, and what I love is one of the workshops I did was on feedback, like how you can give yourself feedback. So going back and reflecting on, okay, these are the steps that I've taken. This is where I'm at right now, and really understanding how you close that gap. So one of my mentees like significantly does that. And every week they'll send me a message. This is what I did. And this is the outcome of it. And, and then I'll get messages like, I feel more confident from just, going through your workshops. And then a couple of them actually wrote me recommendations on LinkedIn, which I'm like super very grateful for. Just sharing. And a lot of what I hear from that is empowerment. Like it's that what I'm trying to achieve, trying to help them to get there. That's one of my main goals, is for them to feel so empowered that they don't rely on other people to make them feel empowered. You don't look for that outside gratification or, you're doing a great job and then you keep going. But how do you do that for yourself, like internally? And then I have another youth that, shared in the first few workshops, like, I want to go to university, and these are all the steps that I'm taking so that I can get there. So part of it is like raising funds for him to be able to go to university. And then, we come on to like the next workshop. I do these monthly, and they'll share with me, Rasie, this is what I did. I wrote down all my goals and I wrote down the actions that I need to take. And this is where I'm at. And what I love too is like they share that in that group. And then now they have that peer support. Yeah.
Wow. So many great examples there. And the more of this that is done, and then the more those individuals who have had that epiphany, let's say, and have practiced self-leadership, something I strongly believe in, empowering yourself as well as being empowered, really shows you what the hope for the future is. So if we take a step back and maybe almost have a chance to reset where we are from government level right down in countries like Sierra Leone, from your observations, what are some of those sort of old habits, perceptions, ways of operating that need to be changed in creating the leaders of the future for Sierra Leone, which they need, and indeed other parts of Africa, actually, who are collective in terms of their leadership, who are more collaborative, more compassionate leaders potentially, and as community driven as you are?
I will start with unlearning. There's a significant of work that needs to be done there. And when I say unlearning, is like the old ways of doing things where I say you do, because I'm the leader, you're below me, kind of thing. And it's almost like there needs to be more like, they need to learn how to lift each other. We need to learn how to see our youth as our partners. And that's something that I intentionally do when I'm interacting with my youth through my mentorship program, or even youth that I interact with on LinkedIn or Instagram. I don't put myself on a pedestal, because we're humans, we're humans first before our titles and all that stuff. Right. And I definitely think there has to be a way that leaders right now in Sierra Leone are able to ask for help, knowing that, okay, there's obviously a gap, but that takes a tremendous courage to be able to do that. You have to be ready to take the action, when you're like, hey, I need help, hiring, like maybe it's like expert to support with that, and also taking action. So, and this is something that I'm very intentional with my youth, is what you take from the workshops, you need to take action. Like, you can come in once a month, take on all this knowledge. When it stays up here, and you don't actually put it into action, you're not making impact. You're literally still stuck where you are, right? And the other part too is the education. There needs to be more emphasis on that. Like I remember when I was in elementary school back home, and just growing up in general, like my parents are like education, education, and having that foundation. And then I moved to Canada. I moved with a guardian, and education wasn't a priority for my guardian at the time. And but I knew that's super important. So I did everything I had to do to make sure I graduated from high school, and I continued to learn. Like I got like my certificate from university. I continue to learn. I'm always reading books and stuff. So I think it's like just prioritizing that it's important to learn, not necessarily like, yeah, you have to go get a degree, but what are you doing to be in control of your self-growth? And I think you need to start from the top.
Always be learning. Never mind, always be selling. Always be learning.
Is
the thing. Particularly these days, I reflect on that as a leader as well. I'm a Gen Xer, and I can say with hand on heart that I'm learning every day still.
Yeah.
And the fast pace in which the world is moving demands it, and it demands what you're talking about. Which is, a little bit more courage to ask for help.
Yes.
Putting pride aside sometimes, and remembering what you brilliantly said, that we're humans first.
Yeah, totally.
I love that. Because if we can be open, and people receiving that message are as open as that, then we get more understanding, empathy, compassion. We start to go down the education route together. We start to understand each other a little bit more. There's so much that can come from that. I suppose now I should play, because there's a lot in there. So I now should play the genie in the lamp for you, I think, and say, if I could grant you one wish.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a big one. Okay. If I could grant you one wish, what is your big hope or dream for the future leaders in Sierra Leone, of whom you might be mentoring right now as you look ahead?
I would say free, quality, empowered education. And the reason why I say free is there's a ton of people who, children right now that their parents can afford to put them in school. So prioritizing that like free education. And maybe it might not be the government doing that, but it might be other parties from outside of Sierra Leone creating that, because I think it's absolutely possible. And I cannot wait that more people can, be on board with it. And I cannot wait to have more youth in my mentorship program. And where I say quality is, it's not just education of like English and math, but it's other things that kids are into. So maybe it could be arts and craft, or it could be science, or it could be someone likes writing, and, just amplifying those strengths and let them be creative. And then in the empowered side is like lifting people up. Instead of, like, oh, you did that wrong, like, this is a consequence, but understanding like, okay, this is what they're good at, but this is not the things that they're good at. And let's just focus on what their strengths are. I think a lot of times we put a lot of emphasis on what wrongs we could make right. And we forget about the things that we're already doing right. Right.
It's quite interesting. Is that while I can't wave my magic wand just yet, I'm hoping that we have some people listening or watching this who do have a view on this, or who could help, or do have some suggestions. Because free, quality, holistic education, experience, and provision for all is something that we know where it is available. Is the real kind of jumpstart for the person, for the individual, for the region, for the organization, for the country, wherever that is. So I'm sure many have been stimulated by this, hearing your words, what you went through, the commitments that you've made to give back also in your own journey here. And I'm sure they would love to get in touch. So how do they get in touch and find out a little bit more about you, what you do, and how do they start a conversation?
Yeah, totally. You can send me a message on LinkedIn. It's my first and last name, Rasie Bamigbade, and also on Instagram. And just let me know where you heard me speak, and we could take a conversation from there. There's a lot of help that's needed. And I'm definitely super grateful for my connections already, my other coaches that I've connected with that are yeah, Rasie, I'll come on as a guest speaker to help you out. And also you can check out my website and see, what I do and stuff, www.rbjumpstartcoaching.com. And and then we can have a conversation from there.
Well, we'll put all of that at the bottom of the screen as we come to the end of this as well. So those of you who are watching will be able to see that, but you've got that detail there. So Rasie Bamigbade, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Food for thought indeed. Really astonishing story that you have yourself, but also humbling what you're putting back, and a real lesson to leaders around the world. In places where we do have the facilities to do more of this as well, not necessarily in the places where the hardships are still there for all to see. So I really appreciate you sharing your story, your passion, and what you're actually doing about it, the actions behind the words. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining our Guest Practices videocast. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel through the link below, or check out our website to access more in our current series of expert interviews.